Jock, you're up.
You all know I'm Jock MacGregor. I am speaking on behalf of the changing of our government from the alderman, or I'm sorry, from the board of directors and mayor to a mayor-alderman type system. The main reason for that I support it, is that it is in conformance with our constitutions and the form of government that allows the people to make decisions instead of the form of government that we have now, which is basically a progressive concept where you have a unified government that is run by the administrative professionals, and that the people's input is minimal and basically ignored. So, under ideal circumstances, that system may work if you have exceptional people, but we're all kind of human and fallible. And if you look at the last 25 or 6 years, I think it is, that it's been under this system, the population of the city has stayed stagnant or decreased. The I'm not sure what all that was, but anyway.
30 seconds.
Oh, okay. They've decreased. My mind just went blank on these, but anyway. They have only got 2 industries in town, basically the healthcare industry and the entertainment, resort, vacation type industry. The whole structure is set up in the government that is basically run by special interests, and those 2 interests control the city and don't allow for any other growth of any size at all, which is why it has been so stagnant for so long. The infrastructure of the city has gone to heck in a handbasket, which is the primary function of government. It is not to glorify this person or that person or anything else. And with that, I've gotten the high sign, I'll give it a cut and let George come on up and tell us why it's so great.
I'm George Pritchett. I'm going to speak to you today as if I were the city manager for the most part. Obviously, city managers trained in city affairs, and I attended the Harvard Knox School of Community Affairs and Service. While there, I learned that my responsibility as a city manager or a similar position would be to promote the city, move it forward, act as a chief administrator, and to be responsible to 7 individuals, the mayor of the city and the 6 board members elected by the public with the mayor at large. We've done this for 26 years, and I think you'll see that we have wonderful results. We have wonderful streets, we have a wonderful police and fire protection system. We have people that are concerned and people that are very responsive. I think that we need to look at the 2 parts of our city, and that is our enterprise funds. And today we're not going to speak about those, but those so you'll be aware, it's about water and sanitation and those things which are paid for themselves. So we're only going to be talking about today our general fund type things and how our city's ran and how we got to where we are and what a wonderful city we have. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, with that saying, who has the first question? I think Judy has the first question. Go ahead, Judy.
I'm addressed to this, both of you. I want to know what advantages it is to me personally, living here in Hot Springs, voting for your option or your option.
You can go first, George.
Well, obviously, I did go to a professional school, and I was trained. And unlike if you have a mayor elected from the city who may be a passionate person, but you have no idea whether they're really qualified to run your city and act as a chief executive. The high rate of business failures in small businesses demonstrates that everybody can go into business and find a position, but they can't necessarily be successful at it. For that reason, the city manager form of government with these hired people people placed in these positions that are trained and selected that way. And when I report and present someone to the city board, you can be assured that that person is a well-qualified as city attorney, or is to handle our money, or to handle our ER, or any of the other things that the paid professionals in our community do for us today that deliver you a wonderful city. Thank you.
Some of you may have seen a letter that I wrote to the editor that was published today. And in it, I define government. And government is formed to protect the rights and the property of its citizens. Its purpose is to provide civil order for all citizens without prejudice or favor, and in a manner consistent with the primary function of protecting the individual citizen's property and rights. Governmental efficiency or ease is not the primary function of government, particularly if the price of efficiency diminishes the God-given and constitutionally protected rights of the individual and his property. And that basically is the reason that in the oral form, although not perfect, is a better setup than what we have now, because right now there is no accountability. You've got a board of directors who say, well, it's run by my friend over here, George, and he's sitting there in a position where nobody elected him. And it takes 4 members of the board of directors to have him replaced. 4 out of 7. So you have a very difficult situation for the populace if they're dealing with the problem of not liking what's going on in their government, being represented in any way. What you have are a mayor who has 1 vote and 6 district representatives who each have a vote. And when it comes down to, there's only 1 person in there that was elected by everybody in the city, and that's the mayor. But their 1 vote is done in by the special interest votes of the 6 others. If you have a strong mayoral, even if you have 12 aldermen, the mayor runs the city, it's the executive. It's the way our governments were meant to be, to have tension between the executive and the legislature. The aldermen become the legislature. You have 2 different kinds of appeals then as a voter. For one thing, you have something to say about who your alderman is in your vote, and then you have an overall vote in the mayor. And that is, you start to form accountability. You can have the expertise of a manager who is hired or fired by the mayor. They have to answer to the mayor. The mayor has to answer to us.
All right, do we have another question? All right, we'll start with Sue, and then Daniel will be second, okay?
Again, philosophically, we've heard, I'd like to know what the practical implications are. What steps would be taken politically, administratively, etc., if this passed in the election? Because I don't know what it says.
Well, that's a question a little bit apart from what we're trying to do, but to tell you the truth, what would happen is that's all defined by statute, how that would be done. There would be a very smooth transition. In my position, I would be working with the newly elected in a transitional role to let them know what I do and how it's done, and you would have to elect some other people, a treasurer, and I believe an attorney, and some other things. But should that be the case, the statutes are such that it would be a smooth transition. We would not be the first city returning to that form of government. I advocate we don't do that, because the city manager, I think you have the benefit of professionalism that I think is important. But I will have to concede that if you have a passionate mayor that's qualified, that was elected by the people, they can also be a good chief executive in the community. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Next question.
Dan?
You know, I'm glad Jock said that all of them will be the legislature, because then nothing gets done, that's good. But I've been in business here in Hot Springs under both forms of government. And when we used to have the mayor alderman government, the people had no voice. Because when the awning was coming down there on Central Avenue, I went up there and I was going to speak and they said, Mr. Lewin, the awning is coming down. Now, what do you want to say? And the thing is that when you elect the mayor alderman system, all you're going to do is blackmail one man, and that's a mayor, because he's got the veto right of everything that anybody says. So I can see Oakland again being in control of the city. And then when we went over to the city director, we got rid of 2 good city managers because they didn't quite see with the status quo. Then we got Lance Hudson, who was a local guy, a great guy. Yeah. But he was local and he was responsive to the local elements such as the A&P Commission and the Oakland and stuff like that.
Okay, so what's your question, Dan?
Well, the question is, how are we going to avoid more catastrophes like we had with that millions of dollars being wasted because the local guy's in charge? How are we going to do that?
Well, first of all, you had Democrats in charge for 125 years. Okay, there's a tendency when you have one-party rule to become abusive of that power. Now we have an active electorate who's becoming more and more active. We do have more than one party being represented in the city and in the county. More so in the county, unfortunately, for the city. First of all, the government isn't that much more responsive, if it's responsive at all now, than it was then. They were a little more honest about it then. They just told you to shut up and sit down. Now they just won't put you on television and then tell you to shut up and sit down. So that hasn't changed. You cannot make what is it, a silk purse out of a sow's ear. If you've got bad people running the government, I don't care what the government form is, it'll only be marginally better or worse. As a matter of fact, I think that there was, in the 1950s, when this became a hot item to go to the manager system, there was, I believe, 15 or I guess about 20 of the cities went for it. 15 of them have gone back to the mayoral system. We're one of the 5 that are holdouts so far. And even the Arkansas Times, with whom I haven't found myself in agreement very often, started off an article that said, the city manager form of government in Arkansas is starting to look like an idea whose time has come and gone. And I think that that is the case. Ultimately, it is up to the people to hold who they elect accountable. Under the system we have now, it's very difficult to hold anybody accountable. You've got all of the commissions that are being run that are just there. Who runs them? Who controls them? The city manager. But there's no election of the city manager. We have no input to that. What do we have to say about the A&P Commission that gets 3 cents out of every dollar that's spent in the city for food or liquor or entertainment? They have a war chest of $17 million, and we have problems with our roads. They don't want to know about it. They want to go spend their money on whatever. They want to buy a ball field. Isn't that wonderful? On top of mine.
A topsy.
All right, George, do you want to respond?
You know, one of the things that a city manager that I want to tell you all is when I was attending my school, one thing I learned was that corrupt individuals, corruption in government, corruption in any group or any business, that's individuals, that's not a form of government. If you have corrupt individuals, you'll have corrupt government. I do not believe today that whether you choose as the voters of Hot Springs to change or not to change, that corruption should be a consideration, because I think there are checks and balances, and there's a lot of things. My friend Jock has made some good points, but I have to tell you, let's leave corruption out of it and talk about the benefits. And the benefit of this form of government is you have the benefit of professionalism. You have hired people filling jobs, and they're well paid too. I mean, I have a well-paid position in this city, as would the mayor if you elected a mayor. But at the end of the day, you have professionals answering to 6 people, 7 people with your mayor elected at large, that are your representative and are responsive. Pick up your phone, call them, rattle their cage, send them emails, and they will be responsible to you. Some of you will have to make more noise than others to get them to respond, because some of them aren't very responsive on emails, but you will find a way. And I have encouraged all of them in my city manager role to be responsive to the citizens of Hot Springs. Thank you.
Diane?
Well, a couple things, but the top one would be, regardless of which side you are voting for in terms of an election, how many people here would be willing to work themselves almost relentlessly until the election to have a turnout, to have people elected that who you know and who you can count on? Because if you don't, and the other side wins, if they will win because they have clout. We don't have clout unless we go out and work for it. And if you're not going to work for it, I doubt there's anybody else out there organized to work for it. Well, if you're not successful, it will give the other side more power than they already have to do what they damn please. So if you're going to do it, you better be resigned and consigned that you're the ones who are going to make it happen. If you're going to make it happen, then you also have to be willing to vet the people who you think would be good candidates, make sure that they understand what the word conservative means, which most people don't, including the Republicans. Very few have any idea what it means. So if you're going to take this on, you can't take it on like this is an interesting thing, let's see what happens. Because the other side, if we vote the way Clay wants, the other side is going to have candidates. And they know who they want for candidates. So you could have a whole mess of people that are picked and chosen by the A&P people, the Chamber of Commerce people, and the 50 for the Future people, who are the people who have been in charge and they don't want to lose it. They are there for their benefit. If you're going to be there for our benefit, then are you? I mean, look at yourself and ask yourself the question. I'm not speaking, like this is an interesting conversation. Look at yourself and say, how committed would you be to not only having Clay's side win the election, but how committed are you to seeing that there are viable candidates that you know and you vetted and you can count on, and that you will get elected?
Okay, George, you want to respond to that first?
Is that question?
Thank you, Ms. Owens. Again, I offer as city manager that my position is an administrative position. I report to the people that are in those elected positions, and I answer to them. I must point out to you that the groups, and you all are all aware of the groups, the Chamber's been supportive of the city administrative form of government, 50 for the Future had. There's been many, and I must assure you all that they're passionate. I'm speaking to you today because none of them wanted to come and speak to you. I'm sorry that they didn't, and I encouraged them as city manager to send a spokesman here to give you our side, but they did not choose to do so. So I'm here to tell you why it's better, and I am telling you why it's better. But I will point out to you that passion, it is alive and well with 50 for the Future, the Chamber of Commerce. And would they have candidates if you all vote to change the form of your government? Absolutely they will. And will they want to put forward the same agenda that we have today at the city? I believe that they will. But as city administrator, your chief executive officer, this form of government controls and acts as a good system of balances for that. We present it to them. There will be people in administrative positions bringing things to the aldermanic form of government should that occur. Thank you.
Jock? Okay, Tom?
Jock, I think we all know that the primary reason that Clay brought this up was around the issue of the ETJ. And I think we know under the current form of government, that's not likely to change, or their position is not likely to change. What confidence would those county residents have if this would change, that the new alderman mayor form of government would eliminate that ETJ and pull those boundaries back in?
Well, I don't know that it would necessarily guarantee anything. The difference is that a lot of pressure can be put on the mayor and individual aldermen, but particularly the mayor, to rein in some of the activities that are being done because they can't pay for what they want to do. So there'll be some pressure on that. There's also, you know, some limitations that are being pushed at the state level, and there are some possibilities of some lawsuits and things like that that will progress as this goes along. I don't think it's a dead issue as far as the ETJ is concerned, but I don't think that this will automatically change it, but I do think that it will improve the possibility of change.
George, you want to respond?
Well, I have mixed emotions as chief executive of your city about the ETJ. Certainly looking at other cities and then reserving the right to go into the outskirts, it's a valid business point because we don't want substandard things outside of our city limits that we're probably going to incorporate at some point into our city limits. And then we take on the burden of maybe substandard streets, substandard structures, a number of things. In discussion with your county judge, his largest area with the ETJ is that he gets a lot of calls from people about substandard things. And I'm not going to elaborate on that. And I understand his problem with that. And I'm sympathetic to it. But I'm also sympathetic to the rights of people. So I advise the city board that it is in our best interest to reduce our ETJ. We probably do need to retain some part, certainly the parts which we do plan to annex at some time. Prior to my coming here and joining the city, the policy has always been no forced annexation. That policy has not changed. It's a little troubling as chief executive to understand that's your policy and also find a number of them that don't want to give up anything. I'm more concerned about the financial aspects and the costs that it incurs to the city with our planning department and taking up city officials and city employees' time and yet not having a role out there. And I certainly sympathize with those in the county that do not have a voice. I don't have the answer on ETJ. I know this election was called based on ETJ, but I think it's today more about how our government functions and what we've delivered to you in our fine city in the last 26 years and where you want to go in the future. Thank you.
Bob?
I have a question for you, Mr. City Manager.
Yes, sir.
You referenced other cities and how we compare. The only other cities in this state that still have city manager form of government are Texarkana, Arkansas, Hope, Arkadelphia, and us. There's actually only 4. And except for the college population, none of those cities have grown and progressed. Cities such as Conway, Jonesboro, Fayetteville, Springdale, Rogers have grown immensely after changing to the aldermanic form. Why do you think that is?
Tell me about Little Rock.
In Little Rock. Thank you.
Mr. Triggers, that's a good question. I'm going to assume that whatever form of government they're working in and with, that they're doing the right things, that they're growing. I brought to the cities, to our city board, our mayor's attention, and also to our citizens that we need to grow. You know, as your fire chief said, if you're not growing, you're stagnating. And I do believe that. It's important that we grow. Now, how we grow is another factor. I've suggested we have to grow retail because from what I can identify in my short tenure here, we don't have a lot of other things to grow. As you pointed out, our growth has been, our population has been the same much for the last 30 years. And we're still a tourism city. Our lakes, the Oakland complex brings people. And truthfully, while I'm supportive of the administrative form of government, your question presents a good one, and I'd like to debate that with some of those officials, but I truthfully can't tell you that I have an answer to that question. But thank you for the question.
Jock, did you want to respond to that? Jock, did you want to respond to that?
No.
Okay, you get the next one.
Okay, my question is for George too. I would like to know how much is your well-paid position, and can we use that to reduce the gouges we have from our city water bills and our garbage, if we were to remove that?
I must tell you that in my family, my wife controls the checkbook. I truthfully don't know what comes into the coffer once a month from the city. I did sign a contract, and I'm well compensated, and I'm satisfied.
But that's what I mean. You said you're well compensated. Do you know how much?
I think I make about $150 a year.
Oh, okay.
Truthfully, I don't know. I have some other benefits, medical and that, and they're certainly going to settle up with me when I sell my home.
Because, you know, our water bill just continues to go up every year, like we're supposed to be happy. Only a few cents each year.
You know, I understand it, and I began my presentation here today by saying that we're going to take the enterprise funds out of it. I do recognize that y'all have a history with your previous city manager and some staff and the $6 million water debacle. I understand that, and I'm going to call it what they call it in the newspaper. It was a debacle. Now, but the enterprise funds, sanitation, sewer, water, trash, et cetera, those are all self-supporting funds, sir. And while part of my revenue comes from that, and I am responsible for that, most of the issues that would come into play in this form of government, in my opinion, are general fund issues. And to speak to this group today, I tried to restrict my preparation to that, because we could argue forever about how much do we need in the future for what period of time, and if ever, about water and sewer and that.
So you're saying they're self-supporting, but I'm the self that's supporting it? I want to be sure of that.
Absolutely you are. Every one of you are. I mean, I recognize, and I was not city manager when some of these policies were adopted, and I would have gone a different route, truthfully. But they made a decision a number of years ago to charge more outside the city limits versus inside the city limits. They made decisions not to annex. So today we're faced with the fact that we have established two classes of citizens that the city of Hot Springs serves. And that is those of you that live outside the city and have no representation, with the exception of the Planning Commission. By the way, something I disagree with, that it works that way. Y'all, representation or no representation is what you have. So I'm encouraging our city director and our mayor to make some changes in that because of that. That's why we're all here today, because the ETJ issue arose. You bring a good point. Why do we treat citizens outside the city limits in reference to water and sanitation differently than we do inside? I think that is wrong, but that is a structure that was there, and it's going to take some period of time to change that. That is one of the things that I told them I disagreed with when they interviewed me.
That sounds like discrimination, and I thought that was illegal.
It may be, sir, but that's not the venue here today.
Dr. Jack, you're next. Dr. Jack?
I wanted to make one
local comment. Okay.
Studies have shown that the cost of paying for a mayor and not paying for the director, or the manager rather, that under either system they tend to be about the same amount of money, give or take a couple of bucks literally. One system seems to, the mayoral system seems to put more emphasis on the police department and the other on the fire department. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of difference between, in terms of money, between the system, one system and another.
Dr. Jack?
Okay, I'm going to ask a question that may also be a statement, and I'm going to ask it of the manager, Jock, and the whole group. Because I want to get at something you know, we always talk about our motivations, but maybe there's one more. Had Tom Wilkins, Richard McGrew, Jack Sternberg, along with the mayor, if they had all been elected and were now the directors, the majority conservatives, how many of you would be thinking about wanting to change the form of government? That's my question.
That's because you would be more responsive. And we wouldn't be,
And I understand, but what guarantee do you have that electing 12 aldermen and a mayor who is going to be like President Obama with power and executive decisions, that somehow you'll guarantee a better situation than we have now? I know we don't like the situation, but where's the guarantee?
there is no.
And as Diane said, unless you get out there and elect 7 conservatives, you're going to end up with a worse situation. At least you know the end in hand.
Jock?
Well, those fine candidates didn't win. That's number one. And yes, it probably would have been slightly different in terms of having a board that was more to our liking. But it still doesn't change the fact that essentially we have a government that has produced nothing for the citizenry. Produced money and a good living for some of the businesses, but not for the citizenry. We are one of the lowest, if not the lowest, average earnings in a state that is low in average
Seventh
earnings.
poorest in the nation.
74th, what, how many?
7th poorest city in the nation.
7th poorest city in the nation. Now, if you want to judge based on outcome, we haven't done very well under this system. And I think that if we can look at a system that will be geared in its concept towards, instead of crony capitalism, free market capitalism, we'll find that we have a growing city instead of a dying city.
George, did you want to?
You know, when I was hired, excuse me, after the election came about, I recognized that I may have new bosses. I could work with this group, I could work with a different group, I could work with any group that you provide, if you'll give me your direction. If your elected representatives will give me the direction and give me some instructions what they want me to do, I will model that into the budgets, I'll model that into the operation of the city, and I will deliver the best product I can to the citizens of Hot Springs with the approval of the city board. The question that Dr. Jack presented, if we had different people, my job would be exactly the same. If you want things different, it's up to you, the people, to influence those representatives. Will I be responsive to you if you call me and ask me a question? You bet your bippy I will. I will respond, and I'll even sit down with you. But your representatives are the one that call those shots, and those are the people that you elected to office. And I'm not certain whether you're pleased with who you elected or you're displeased with who you're elected. But that's the people I have to report to, and I take my direction from them. However, will always listen to the input from you as citizens.
All right, Darren.
Yeah, you know, this should be a serious matter. It's turned into a great big joke. I don't think we should be serious about it. I think Dr. Jack is right. And I want to, George, Mr. Dave, I think you've been doing a fine job up there. Now, I got one more question. If things change, what's your severance pay?
I'm going to assume it's approximately $200,000, but I'm uncertain. I know that we recently gave, in accordance with normal policy in this form of government and the type of employees that we have, we gave a severance package at the urging of others to our city attorney and some others. But I have to point out that that's corporate America, people. It was not something that's unfair or unwarranted. And likely, if you had the mayoral form of government and he's elected, you're going to be paying him or her, and you're going to have other people in the staff of the city that have extra packages. That's just the way of life in our world today. I'm going to offer one thing. I'm taking my hat off for a minute. At the end, I'm going to wrap up what I really feel, folks.
That's why I say it's a joke.
It's not a joke.
Yeah,
It's not a joke, because we did ask people who would represent the cities as it currently exists to come, and nobody would come.
They had commitments.
They might have, I mean, whatever. Not anybody from all of the different groups who support the current government was available, not one.
Well, it's very interesting that next Thursday at the Republican Party meeting, that group that didn't come here begged to come to the Republican Party meeting.
It was a Tea Party, they didn't want to acknowledge existence.
Possibly. I just want to say that. So it's not that they're unwilling to come to conservatives. For some reason, they might have felt this was enemy territory.
Which could very well be.
The next question?
I just would like to know what kind of guidelines on both of these would people be subjected to? Like, are there some sort of guidelines in order to represent the people? You know, is it an amount of education?
Some of them get elected.
Yeah.
Who could get elected?
Same, pretty much the same as it is now.
So is there any way to get guidelines, or how?
Why would you want guidelines? Why does it necessarily mean that somebody with a college education is a better
not
runner
necessarily
than
college.
somebody who doesn't have one?
Anybody can get elected.
Let me interject. Just as if with corruption, the guidelines would be no different for those filling the positions in your city hierarchy and administration than they are today under the current form of government. I mean, civil servants, and as a civil servant, we are bound to serve the people. And the guidelines would be the same whether those positions are elected, if it's an aldermanic form of government, or the way it is today, or any form of government for that matter.
Russ, you've got the last question, and then I'll give both sides just a couple minutes, because we're really pushing time late now. Okay, so Russ, quick answer, and then you guys wrap up.
I think there's three big issues in the town, three major ones. Controlling personnel costs, paving the streets, and the third one would be the crime rate that has become one of the nation's highest. So could y'all tell us how your form of government is better than the other one at addressing those three issues?
You have to be pretty quick too, so.
When I came to the city, I was told all the problems. I was told about the old police and firemen's debt, $25, $50 million. I drove on the streets, I recognized the infrastructure. I listened to people in the city, I listened to people from the chamber, I listened to people from the Tea Party group and various groups. I recognize all the problems. You all know what all the problems in the city are. As a city manager in this form of government, I am committed to attacking those problems. Public safety, as our friend just pointed out, that's the number one thing. I might add that there's some questions about how crime statistics are gathered, but I want to remind every citizen in Hot Springs, you are the law enforcement in Hot Springs. You see the people committing the crime. You have to report them. Law enforcement is dependent upon law-abiding citizens. The police officers and the firemen come in to clean up the problem with people. Let's be realistic. I don't want anyone to misunderstand that they come in to do the cleanup. And they do protect us, and they do a good job. But we have 767 miles in the county, 35 in the city, and we have 105 police officers in the city to cover effectively 21 shifts a week. We are shorthanded. We need more officers. We need more money. We need more things, but we also know that we have to take that from you, the citizens. Sales tax is our number one source of revenue in our general fund. We have a problem. We don't have enough money. And while Russ pointed out to us that city employees, we have a lot of employees. And I'm looking at that. I'm looking for places to cut. I believe we should cut. But at every juncture, I am met with opposition by department heads. I'm even met with opposition from the board. I'm met with opposition from different people. Our form of government is good, but if the representatives that you elected want what they want, then I am bound by my commitment to them to provide them that the best way I can. So I'm giving budgets. I made recommendations in last year's budgets. I'll make a recommendation. But you have the answers. You have the answers. All you have to do is put the answers in the ears of your representatives if you want this form of government to work. And you have an uphill battle, because I will tell you, they have a strong coalition behind them.
Basically, I agree with what George had to say, that it is up to the people. The difference is that, and you know, there's nothing wrong with having a city manager as long as the mayor is an executive who runs the city, and the legislature is a legislature. When you have those two setups, then you have the ability to affect it. You're not going to change it instantly, but you have a much better, you're in a much better position as voters to affect the outcome of what's going on, because people are held accountable. Right now, who's held accountable for what? I mean, it's good that George says that as public servants, they serve the people, but he answers to the board. So how can he serve the board and the people when he doesn't know what the people want? He only knows what the board wants. And there are a series of power groups that have existed in the city for some time. But that's because there is no way to break that up. And the only way to break it up is to separate the mayor out and start to have some conflict between the legislature and the executive as to how the city is run.
I want to offer, because I failed to close it with one statement. I, as city manager, opposed the fact that they stopped televising the public comment section of the meetings. I didn't oppose it because it would help me or hurt me. I opposed it because it nullified and took away the rights of you all to stand up and speak. And I'm really saddened that the people that I report to chose to do that, because they indicated, and I shared with them that they indicated they did not want the public's input and they looked bad. But they are independent. They are your representatives. In the future, you have the opportunity to change your representatives whatever you want. But changing the form of government is not going to improve our city. Thank you.
In view of the fact that Glenn's still out, I should announce to you that there will be another forum tomorrow evening, Lakeside Independent School District, 6:30, hosted by Director Randall Foley. And